slurring, lecherous Captain Jack Sparrow is just one of the more recent iconic oddballs brought to the big screen by Hollywood heartthrob Johnny Depp. Before him came a string of misfits and loners like Edward Scissorhands, Ed Wood, Raul and Donnie Brasco, all of which brought him critical acclaim but little commercial success. Having made an early career decision only to play roles that pleased him, he chose not to accept lead roles in Interview with a Vampire, Speed, The Matrix and Titanic. Mercifully, 2003's Pirates of the Caribbean, Curse of the Black Pearl turned out to be a blessing, delivering $653 million worth of box office treasure and earning him his first Oscar nomination. More importantly, Johnny was having a ball with a character he based on Rolling Stones guitarist Keith Richards.
Oh, I mean, it was amazing. Good time, you know, developing the guy, finding the guy, and then ultimately being the guy. It was really a blast from start to finish. I mean, so much so that I really missed him, you know, at the end. I went through like a period, you know, like a couple of months where it was like, yeah, it's like decompression, depression.
Swashbuckling his way through the Jerry Bruckheimer maritime extravaganza, he got to share the adventure with the likes of Keira Knightley, Orlando Bloom and Jeffrey Rush.
The experience was, you know, it was like almost criminal because it was so much fun, you know. There were moments where we look at one another and, you know, sort of be like, can you believe we actually get to do this, you know? This is what we're doing for a living. You know? Yeah, it was really wonderful.
Luckily, he only had to wait another 2 years to don the eyeliner and pirate outfit and embark on the next action-packed mission to find the dead man's chest. The sequel became the fastest film to make $1 billion at the box office. Not bad, considering the amount of larking around that had taken place on set.
He wouldn't do the full Jack Sparrow if the camera was on you. As soon as the camera turned around, it's like you couldn't give him the off-camera lines because you were laughing too much. I think there'll be a lot of outtakes of just everybody pissing themselves in the middle of the scene.
For all the fun and frolics, however, it was clear that Johnny was taking his approach to the character very seriously.
With Captain Jack specifically, one of the main deals for me was, you know, how did Bugs Bunny do it? You know, like how do you? Where's the character that a 5-year-old can enjoy and an 80-year-old can enjoy and a hardened intellectual, you know, can enjoy? And so that's where I was attempting.
And according to Oscar winner Jeffrey Rush, he'd more than nailed the brief.
The sort of work he's done over the last 10 or 15 years, from Edward to Edward Scissorhands to, you know, he goes off and does J.M. Barrie and Finding Neverland. I mean, he is an actor's actor. It's a long time since we've seen that kind of extraordinary versatility that has now reached and found its kind of fruition in a big, popular, mainstream summer popcorn movie. And I love that because that really helps raise the bar.
The bar was raised again in the third installment of the franchise in 2007, which brought the real-life inspiration for Captain Jack Sparrow into the fold to play his father. Despite Keith Richards' lack of acting experience, Johnny was impressed with the aging rocker's form.
It was amazingly normal and calm and right. You know, Keith came on and was beautiful. He was totally professional, perfect. You know, came in, knew his words, did his bit. You know, did it like it was any other gig. I mean, he just did it perfectly. There was, you know, it wasn't like, you know, people could tell that it was his first cinematic sort of venture. He was just perfect.
The franchise that had been based on a Disney theme park ride came home to roost, with the world premiere of World's End at Disneyland in LA. And as Johnny and the rest of the cast took off on a worldwide red carpet tour to promote what would be, for the time being at least, the end of the series, Johnny was having withdrawal symptoms.
It's hard because you're faced with the potential that you know, this guy that you've been, and I know it sounds totally absurd, but this guy that you've been, this person that you've been for a couple of years, that you may not ever see him again. So you have a, you know, there's kind of there's a period of decompression, which involves depression as well. So yeah, and you just get through it, you know. But there's always that potential in the back of your mind going, you know, maybe you'll see him again, maybe.
In between all the staggering and swaggering of the Pirates of the Caribbean series, Johnny has continued to test his highly regarded versatility as an actor. In 2003, he shared the screen with Salma Hayek in the Robert Rodriguez romp Once Upon a Time in Mexico. Cast as a corrupt CIA agent who tries to control Mexico's fate from a mobile phone, he got yet another opportunity to indulge his love of character roles.
It was the first time I've ever done a film where I actually went to the director at the end and said, "Are you sure there's nothing else we can shoot? You know, I'd really like to stay." You know, I really had a good time. Yeah.
Flushed from the success of the first Pirates movie and Once Upon a Time in Mexico, he jumped genres again, opting to play a depressed best-selling author in the thriller Secret Window, an adaptation of Stephen King's novella. For Johnny, it was all about the script.
It's very rare that you get the opportunity to read a script that within the first 4, 5, 6 pages you have a pretty serious emotional investment into the thing, you know, and you continue reading, and page after page, you know, you're convinced you're going this one direction, you know, the writer's leading you down this path, and then, you know, all of a sudden he takes you somewhere else and you didn't see it coming.
The same could perhaps be said of Johnny's acting, according to his co-star, John Turturro.
He's a real character actor who's in the body of a leading man. And that's not unusual, and he's got his own route. And I think, you know, I think he's actually gotten better as he's gone on, too, you know, too. And I think he's someone I could work with, like, again and again. It's fun to work with him.
Then it was back to the Venice Lido to celebrate his turn as Peter Pan author J.M. Barrie in Finding Neverland alongside Kate Winslet. It brought him his second Oscar nomination in 2 years, despite the fact that for once, Johnny's famous ear for accents had almost failed him.
It was one that was really far away from me. I mean, in terms of my ear, I couldn't quite hear it initially, and so I just, you know, just studied and studied and studied. I worked with this dialect coach who was from a Scottish family, and she was incredibly helpful. Yeah, because I tend to approach that kind of thing as a musician, you know. I learned how to play by ear, so it's all, I take it down as sort of musical notes to me, and I couldn't find the music initially.
Clearly, it all worked out well in the end, and the film's director Mark Foster was the first to praise Johnny on his approach to his career.
I think, you know, Johnny Depp is a person who never chose his performances for box office or to be a huge movie star. He always chose it because he loved the part and he wanted to do the part. So that's why he chose the performances he did in his life.
He chose to play another British writer the following year in The Libertine. This time he took on the role of the second Earl of Rochester, who once described himself as the wildest and most fantastical odd man alive. Known as the muse and mentor of 17th century stage great Elizabeth Barry, John Wilmot made his own direct contribution to the arts.
For me, Rochester was a great poet, you know, and an overlooked poet, you know, who's really, really important in terms of British literature, or in terms of literature itself. But he was kind of overlooked because he was written off in a lot of ways as a satirist or a pornographer or whatever. He was a guy who was, I think, probably at least 200 to 300 years ahead of his time.
And he hadn't done with playing writers yet. In 2008, he was persuaded to reprise the role of controversial author Hunter S. Thompson in a new film by Alex Gibney. Johnny had first portrayed the self-destructive author in the 1998 film Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, and Gibney was determined to secure his services as narrator of Gonzo, the life and work of Dr. Hunter S. Thompson.
You know, he has a deep affection for Hunter. He lived with Hunter in the basement of his house for, you know, over a month. And there's a kind of psychic bond between them. They both come from Kentucky. So he inhabits Hunter like nobody else.
Having spent years on the periphery of commercial success, Johnny had suddenly become one of the highest paid actors in the business. He was having trouble coming to terms with all the attention.
Confused. It's weird. I mean, like the sort of, the Screen Actors Guild Award and various nominations and things like that. Although on one hand it's a great honor, it truly is. But when that kind of thing arrives, it's sort of it felt like it came out of nowhere. I mean, out of left field, because all I've been doing is really just focusing my attention to the work, and then so you're focused on this thing, and suddenly someone comes in and says, hey, they want to do this thing at the AFI, or the hand and feet ceremony at the Grauman's. It's like, what I'm doing this, I don't understand. In terms of me, it didn't make sense. None of it makes sense, but what do I know,
One thing he obviously does know is how to play outcasts. And in 2009, he chose to play a real-life 1930s gangster in Michael Mann's biopic of John Dillinger, Public Enemies. The shoot-'em-up blockbuster threw up lots of opportunities to let off steam.
It's like you get a bunch of grown men into a room with a bunch of machine guns and you suddenly become, a child again.
At the UK premiere of his 2009 film Public Enemies, Johnny was asked a rather personal question.
Have you ever seen someone across the room and had that feeling of true love at first sight?
Yeah, we've been together about 11 years and we have 2 children.
Uncharacteristically open about his private life, he happily went on to describe his first encounter with French singer Vanessa Paradis.
I saw a back from about 30 yards away. I saw a back and a neck, and it turned around suddenly and looked at me, and I was stupefied, and then it was over.
Johnny first met Vanessa while filming his 1999 movie Ninth Gate in Paris. Hot on the heels of his breakup with supermodel Kate Moss, the cracking pace of their courtship spawned speculation that Johnny was on the rebound from Kate and that the relationship would soon be over. For the past 4 years, he and Kate had been a regular fixture at red carpet events around the world. Their notoriously tempestuous relationship providing endless fodder for entertainment shows and gossip magazines. Both had already developed reputations as hellraisers. Johnny's famous love of the nightlife had led him to open his own club on Sunset Strip. Even after the death of River Phoenix from a drug overdose there in 1993, the Viper Room remained a hangout for Hollywood's hottest up-and-comers until it closed in 2004. Meanwhile, Kate had already stirred up plenty of controversy with her stick-thin frame and alleged appetite for recreational drugs. When they split in 1998, Kate was said to be devastated. And just 1 year later, she had to come to terms with the news that Johnny's new girlfriend had given birth to his daughter, Lily Rose. And when Kate ran off the rails into drug troubles in the early 2000s, some commentators harked back to her heartache.
Maybe she's still obsessing over the loss of Johnny Depp. And I think he was the great love of her life, and it's very sad the relationship ended. And probably the fact, he's constantly pictured in the celebrity glossies and newspapers with Vanessa Paradis, and the children are, the model, that must be a constant torture.
Kate's isn't the only heart he's broken along the way. After divorcing his first wife and being engaged to Sherilyn Fenn, the most famous of all Johnny's early love affairs came with his starring role in the 1990 Tim Burton film Edward Scissorhands. He and his 19-year-old co-star Winona Ryder ended up falling for each other on the set of the romantic fairy tale, and they were engaged shortly after. So certain was Johnny that he'd found his soulmate, he took the rather rash and permanent step of having Winona Forever tattooed on his arm. When they split up in 1993, he had the last 2 letters of her name removed to make it read Wino Forever. That slap in the face left Winona needing to take some time off, while Johnny swiftly moved on. However, after Vanessa gave birth to their second child, John Jack Christopher, in 2002, it started to look as though Johnny had finished sowing his wild oats and was finally ready to settle down, much to the disappointment of the millions of women who repeatedly voted him the sexiest man alive. And in 2003, at the age of 40, he confirmed that his hell-raising days were over, thanks to Vanessa.
And it wasn't until, in terms of the transformation, meeting Vanessa, becoming a parent, becoming a father, and understanding what's real and what's important in life, and having some perspective on life, finally, after all these years.
In 2006, Johnny had become such a familiar fixture in his adopted home of France that he was awarded Paris's highest honor for achievement. After stepping up to receive the Médaille de Vermeil, he made it totally clear that he was off the market, for now at least.
The country itself, the city of Paris, certainly has been very kind to me. You know, it introduced me to my beautiful girl Vanessa. Gave me 2 beautiful kids. Doesn't get better than that.
Exactly how much credit goes to Vanessa for Johnny's metamorphosis from hotel-wrecking party animal to responsible father and top box office star is impossible to calculate. But he no doubt had his pop star partner to thank for helping him nail the singing in his role as the demon barber of Fleet Street in Sweeney Todd in 2008. The big screen version of Stephen Sondheim's famous stage musical Sweeney Todd is just one in a long line of Tim Burton films that Johnny has starred in. Their collaboration began way back in 1990 with Johnny's breakthrough role in Edward Scissorhands. Set in suburban Florida, the film about a boy created by an inventor and left with scissors for hands is widely viewed as an interpretation of Tim's own childhood. He went on to cast Johnny as a misunderstood outsider in a host of subsequent movies like Ed Wood, Sleepy Hollow, and the ghoulish animated comedy The Corpse Bride, which used a similar style of stop animation and computer effects to his 1993 film The Nightmare Before Christmas. At the Corpse Bride premiere in Toronto, Johnny commented on his relationship with the director.
I think we have similar sort of, similar outlook on things, kind of similar understanding of things. Similar sense of humor, you know. And it was kind of, you know, there was a connection that was very hard to describe even back then on Scissorhands, you know. It was just there instantly. So, I don't know, it's hard to explain.
The same year, they collaborated on a big-budget remake of the Roald Dahl children's classic, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. And at the film's Tokyo premiere, Tim returned the favor.
Well, I mean, ever since, I met Johnny on Edward Scissorhands, and then each time has just become more amazing because, you know, he's like, a person who likes to put on funny costumes and act strangely, and that's what I love to work with. You know, he's amazing that way.
Critics have often commented on the similarity between the pale-faced, curly-haired director and the characters that Johnny plays in his films, suggesting that Johnny has become Tim's on-screen surrogate. It seems they certainly share a childlike enthusiasm for life, an attribute that came in very handy in Johnny's preparations to play larger-than-life children's character Willy Wonka.
I think I started making those choices with the idea that I would do exactly what I wanted to do, the way I needed to do it, to leave something behind when I evaporate, you know, for the kids, you know, something that hopefully, at least for a period of time, they could watch these films and go, yeah, Dad was trying something there, you know, something that hopefully they could be proud of one day. You know.
It wasn't only the kids who appreciated his big-toothed, wide-eyed rendition of the mythical Chocolate King. He also impressed his veteran co-star, Christopher Lee.
He's a great, great actor. Of his generation, he's #1.
The film also co-starred Tim Burton's wife, Helena Bonham Carter. And 2 years later, they were playing Happy Families again on the set of Sweeney Todd. The tale of a vengeful barber who slits the throats of wealthy customers and disposes of their bodies in meat pies made for an interesting challenge. But Johnny didn't let the fact that he'd never sung before stand in his way.
There was a lot that appealed to me. First and foremost, that it was a Tim Burton film. The opportunity to get back in the ring with Tim. Second, that it was Stephen Sondheim's brilliant masterpiece. Third, you know, there's the possibility that, you know, it might work, it might not work in terms of me as you know, singing the part. So there's always the interesting thing is the idea of challenging yourself as an actor.
Having worked with Johnny so many times before, Tim was more than happy to take a leap of faith.
Well, I just had a feeling, and you know, I didn't know if Johnny could sing or not, but he said he thought he could, and that was good enough for me. And then, you know, he sent me some music, and it was beautiful. And so I was, you know, it was interesting to work with actors who aren't singers in a very difficult musical. So I think they all did a really beautiful job.
Meanwhile, Helena, another musical first-timer, was also full of praise for Johnny.
He has got an uncanny ability to make anything cool. He is a hip person, Johnny, you know. And his choices are always really clever, you know. And he's made, like when I heard his recordings, it's got a real modern feel, a sort of rocky kind, not rocky, the, you know, box, but it's got a slight rock, modern. He's got a real touch with the contemporary. And he's a really funny mixture, Johnny, as a person, because he's got both high culture and pop culture. He's a real mixture of both. And he's very cultured, but it's just completely eclectic. And so he just knows what to draw on.
The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences agreed and awarded him yet another Oscar nomination for Best Actor. Earlier in the year, it had been Johnny's turn to hand out the honours. At a ceremony in Venice, Tim was delighted to be handed a Lifetime Achievement Award by his favourite leading man.
Well, it's great. I mean, it's really, really nice because I obviously have a, you know, we've done several movies together. I really enjoy working with him, and you know, he's become a friend, and he's just a great person to work with because it's always surprising, always new, you know. And on this movie, you know, he's gone to another level and sings in the movie. So I mean, it's always something amazing and different.
For Johnny and Tim, the next amazing and different thing would be Tim's 3D version of Lewis Carroll's classic novel, Alice in Wonderland. Along with Helena, Alan Rickman, Anne Hathaway and Mia Wasikowska, Johnny put his hand up to star in the ambitious project, which Tim hoped would help audiences connect with Alice and her Wonderland as never before. Although there have been many rumours over the past few months, one film Johnny is adamant he won't be starring in anytime soon is a biopic of the late king of pop, Michael Jackson.
I have great respect for what he's done in his work over the years, certainly a real genius. As far as playing him in a movie, that's such an obtuse rumor that I never had the pleasure of cultivating. It's not my idea, you know.